on the fade. Book it against Towns.
67-14. That is not a final score. That is not a series record. That is a single run. One uninterrupted stretch of basketball in one playoff game, on the road, in a closeout game, against a team whose season was on the line and whose home crowd was as loud as it had been all year. And before that run was finished, the scoreboard read 83-36 at halftime, a 47-point lead, the largest halftime margin in the history of the NBA playoffs. Not in recent history. Not in the modern era. Since the first time a playoff game was ever played, no team had ever been buried that deep by halftime. But here is the part that makes it stranger than any of those numbers. 4 days before this happened, the team that delivered it was down 2-1 with their season threatening to unravel. 2 straight one-point losses. And a 34-year-old nobody had built the series around had just turned into their nightmare on back-to-back nights. To understand how 11-9 became 83-36, you have to understand who this team was. And more importantly, who the league decided they were going to be. One analyst said it plainly before the season started. If your best player is 6'1", you are not winning a championship. Those were his exact words. He was talking about Jalen Brunson. Tom Thibodeau had been fired after the Knicks lost to Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals the year before. His rotations were too heavy, his offense too predictable. The players had stopped responding. In his place, the organization hired Mike Brown, a coach who had just been scapegoated in Sacramento and quietly let go after 3 seasons. The league did not exactly rush to congratulate New York on the hire. Most of the coverage processed it as a lateral move on a good day, a step back on a realistic one. Free agency came and went. The signings were solid, not the kind that change your preseason prediction. The narrative around this team heading into the new year was the same one it had been for 2 straight years. Talented enough to be dangerous, not built to go all the way. And it wasn't just the roster construction that drew skepticism. It was every piece of it. Karl-Anthony Towns was too soft for playoff basketball. He had a history of disappearing when the stage got real. Mikal Bridges wasn't worth the 5 first-round picks they traded to get him. Not at this level. OG Anunoby couldn't stay healthy for a full postseason run. Josh Hart was an energy player, a guy who got highlight clips on hustle plays but wasn't the kind of player you were actually winning a championship with. And at the center of everything, Brunson still carried the weight of every label that had followed him since he first broke into stardom. Too small, too slow, maybe the 10th best point guard in basketball if the person ranking him was feeling generous. They finished the regular season 53-29, third in the East, solid, respectable, not dominant. 4 separate 3-game losing streaks throughout the year told you this team had vulnerabilities, the kind of cracks that a playoff series will find and exploit. But they had also improved dramatically on the defensive end, jumping from the middle of the pack all the way into the top 10. And their offense had been among the best in the league from November through March. Good enough to make it interesting, the analysts said. Not enough to change anything. That was the version of the New York Knicks that walked into the first round. The Atlanta Hawks were not the soft opening round opponent the seeding suggested. Trae Young was gone, traded away as the organization committed to rebuilding around younger pieces. In his place, they had built the team around Jalen Johnson, 24 years old, an all-star. One of the most complete two-way forwards in the Eastern Conference, with the size and athleticism to bother every perimeter player the Knicks were going to throw at him. Johnson had spent 2 seasons flying under the radar while everyone talked about teams above him in the standings. This was his moment to stop being the answer to a trivia question and start being the reason a series went sideways. And then there was CJ McCollum, 34 years old, coming off a bench role on the Utah Jazz. When Atlanta added him in the offseason, most observers processed it as a veteran depth move, someone to steady the second unit, a name that used to matter and now provided experience. After the All-Star break, Atlanta went 20-6, the best record in the Eastern Conference over that stretch, 3rd best in the entire NBA. They came into the playoffs as the 6th seed but carrying the momentum of a team that had quietly figured something out while everyone was watching other teams. Game 1 went to New York. Close all the way through, settled in the second half when Towns took over in the paint. 11 points in the final frame with Atlanta out of answers. Knicks up 1-0. Garden exhaled. Game 2 changed the entire conversation. The Knicks built a 12-point lead heading into the 4th quarter. That number was supposed to mean something. In the shot clock era, since the NBA standardized possession time in 1954, the Knicks had gone 40-1 in the playoffs when leading by double digits entering the final frame. 40-1. Through every generation of this franchise, through every era of basketball, through every series they had ever played. That number was supposed to mean the game was already decided. And then CJ McCollum stepped forward. He caught the ball on the wing in the fourth quarter and drove immediately. No hesitation, no read, straight to the basket on a defense that had been watching him be invisible for 3 quarters. The layup went in. Next possession, he pulled up in the middle of traffic and hit a tough floater that had no business being anything but a miss. It went in. Third straight possession, he stepped back on the baseline on OG Anunoby, fading away from a quality defender in a pressure moment, and the mid-range jumper rattled around and dropped. 3 straight buckets, 3 consecutive possessions where the Knicks had no answer. Hawks win by 1. The player who was supposed to be a depth piece had just stolen a playoff game in the fourth quarter of a game New York was leading by double digits, and Game 3 was worse. The Knicks trailed by double digits early, dragged themselves back through 42 minutes of grinding effort, and Brunson got an and-one layup with the shot clock dying to put New York up 3. Close the game. Go home. The series should have been in hand. Jalen Johnson caught a missed shot in the paint and put it back immediately, cutting it to 1 with 8 seconds on the clock. Atlanta's ball. Last possession. 1 chance. And you already know who they went to. McCollum caught the ball at the top of the key, found his spot in the offense, and rose. The shot was clean. It went in. The arena erupted. Hawks lead. Game over. 2 games. 2 one-point losses. Both decided in the final seconds by the same player. The Knicks were down 2-1 and staring directly at a first-round exit for the second consecutive year. There are moments in a playoff series where you find out what a team is actually built from, not the talent, not the regular season. The moment where the season is threatening to end and somebody in that locker room has to stand in front of it. Brunson did not say much publicly after Game 3 that the cameras could capture. What the people inside the building described was quieter than any speech. He walked back through the tunnel with the same pace he always walked. He sat down, and then he started talking about Game 4 like the result of that game was already settled somewhere. That kind of certainty, after 2 consecutive one-point losses to someone nobody had planned for, is one of 2 things. It is either delusion or it is leadership. Those 2 things only get separated by what happens next. What happened next was Game 4. OG Anunoby put up 22 points and 10 rebounds. Not just the numbers, but the timing of them. Every time Atlanta needed to make a stop and found OG on the other end of the floor, he made them pay. A pull-up jumper when the Hawks cut it to 3 in the third. A driving layup through contact that pushed it back to double digits. Towns turned in a 20-point triple-double, running the offense from the high post with a level of vision that reminded everyone watching what this team looked like when it was all moving at once. Brunson added 19. The Knicks won by 16, and in the fourth quarter, they made it look inevitable. Game 5 was Brunson removing every remaining doubt. He scored 39 points on a performance where the question was whether Atlanta could slow him down, and the answer was consistently no. He found the floater when the drive was cut off. He hit threes when they gave him space, which they could not afford to do. He attacked the and-one opportunities when the defense leaned wrong. The Knicks won by 29. 2 games. 2 wins by a combined 45 points. From down 2-1 to 1 win away from advancing. Atlanta's season was now down to a single game. And for exactly 4 minutes in Game 6, it looked like they might have one more answer in them. State Farm Arena was as loud as it had been at any point in the season. Home crowd, playoff elimination game. Every fan who had watched this team go 20-6 down the stretch and believed this was finally their year. The kind of energy that is supposed to tighten a game. Supposed to shift a momentum. Supposed to give the home team something intangible that evens out the talent. The Hawks led 11-9 4 minutes into the game. For that brief window, 4 minutes, everything the Atlanta crowd believed felt justified. Then OG Anunoby caught a pass at the top of the arc with 7 minutes and 51 seconds left in the first quarter. He fires. It goes in. What followed over the next 12 minutes of basketball was something the NBA had genuinely never seen before. And based on everything that has been recorded about this sport since they started keeping records, may never see again. New York answered that OG 3 with 14 more consecutive points to seize the lead. That was the first signal, but those 14 points were just the opening movement. The real run had not started yet. Brunson probed the lane on the next Atlanta possession and drew a foul. 2 free throws, both good. KAT caught the ball at the elbow, pump-faked his defender off his feet, and dropped a 15-footer with the ease of a player who understood the game was already sliding away from the other team. OG caught the ball in the corner and did not hesitate. Another 3. Hart grabbed an offensive rebound in heavy traffic and put it back through contact. Bridges hit a pull-up on a broken possession when the shot clock was nearly gone. Every single Knicks possession found a way to produce points. Not lucky points, not contested garbage, clean looks, decisive decisions. The kind of execution that takes years to build and only shows up like this when something inside a team has fully clicked. And Atlanta was coming apart in real time. Their point guards were forcing shots they had no business taking because open looks were not appearing. Johnson, their best player, their most reliable weapon, the guy who had been so disruptive through the first 3 games, was playing with the body language of someone who could not find the game they had prepared for. The defensive coverages they had used all series were being dissected possession by possession. By the end of the first quarter, New York had closed on a 31-4 run. The first quarter final, Knicks 40, Hawks 15, the largest first quarter lead in the shot clock era in NBA playoff history. They were just getting started. The second quarter arrived and the machine did not stop. It did not slow down. It did not give Atlanta a possession to breathe and collect themselves and make halftime adjustments feel like something other than a formality. The Knicks poured in 43 more points against Atlanta's 21. The lead went to 30, then 40, then past 40. Brunson was running the offense with the tempo of someone who understood the other team had nothing left. Not a lack of aggression, but a measured relentlessness, picking apart every defensive decision Atlanta tried to make. Cat found cutters that materialized from nowhere. OG kept catching and shooting from the corners with the defender a step late every time. Atlanta called every timeout available. They made defensive adjustments that changed nothing. They put different bodies on Brunson and watched him solve each one. The crowd, which had been so loud an hour earlier, went quiet in stages, not in a single moment, but in that gradual sinking way that a home fan base goes quiet when the game has moved somewhere they cannot follow. CJ McCollum, who had been the nightmare 2 nights in a row, finished Game 6 with 14 points on 5 of 16 shooting. The man who had stolen 2 consecutive games in the fourth quarter was a ghost inside the most historic run in playoff history. The villain got buried in the flood, not by a single counterpunch, but by something that made the whole idea of a counterpunch irrelevant. When the halftime buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read 83-36. 47 points, at halftime, in a playoff game, on the road. The previous record was 41 points, set by the 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers, matched once since then by the 2025 Indiana Pacers. Both were considered once-in-a-generation anomalies. The kinds of numbers that prompt a second glance at the box score because something must have been entered incorrectly. The Knicks made both of those records look ordinary. From the 7:51 mark of the first quarter to the 3:43 mark of the second, a stretch of just under 12 minutes of game time, New York went on a 67-14 run. 67-14, the largest continuous scoring run in NBA playoff history, not by a narrow margin, not because of a technicality, by a distance that made every existing benchmark feel like it was from a different sport. And then the thing that made it human rather than just statistical. Atlanta broke. Not slowly. Physically, completely, in one visible moment. With the Knicks leading 72-22 and 4 minutes and 39 seconds remaining in the second quarter, Dyson Daniels and Mitchell Robinson got tangled up during a free throw box out. Daniels had been absorbing elbows from Robinson throughout the series. This time he gave one back, yanked the arm, threw his own elbow into the ribs. Robinson locked him in a bear hug and would not release. Both benches cleared. A referee went to the floor. A security guard went with him. Players and coaches poured in from both sides. Both were ejected. The NBA fined Robinson $50,000. Daniels was fined $25,000. And when order was restored and basketball resumed, nothing had changed because the score was already 72-22. The brawl was not a turning point. It was proof of one. Proof that Atlanta had already broken long before anyone threw an elbow, and that what was left on the floor was the residue of a team that had given up trying to solve the problem and was now just reacting to the frustration of it. Final score: New York Knicks 140, Atlanta Hawks 89, a 51-point margin. After going down 2-1 with 2 gut-punch 1-point losses, the Knicks had won the next 3 games by 16, 29, and 51 points, a combined margin of 96 points in 3 games. Against the hottest team in the Eastern Conference over the season's final stretch, the league had the message. It was not subtle. Round 2, the Philadelphia 76ers, who had just knocked out the defending champion Boston Celtics. New York was not impressed. Game 1, Brunson dropped 35 and the Knicks won by 39. The machine that started in Atlanta had not been turned off. It had just found a new opponent. Game 4 was where history showed up again. New York hit 11 three-pointers before the first quarter buzzer sounded, a postseason record that nobody had seen before, and finished the game with 25, tying the all-time mark. Final score, 144-114. Philadelphia swept in 4 games, but the round that separated the statistical story from something bigger, something that required a different word than dominance, was the Eastern Conference Finals against Cleveland. The Cavaliers had earned the right to be there. They had ended Boston's title defense by playing physical, suffocating basketball in every close game. Donovan Mitchell in fourth quarters, an identity that was hard and well coached and built to beat exactly the kind of explosive offensive team that New York had become. Cleveland was not a fluke. They were the other serious contender, and they led Game 1 by 22 points with under 8 minutes remaining. The analytics models had Cleveland's win probability at 99.9%, a number that, for most teams, would mean the game is over and the bus is being warmed up. The Knicks went on a 44-11 run, took the game to overtime, won. That 8-minute stretch was not the 67-14 run. It was not as historically violent, not as complete. But in some ways, it meant more, because the 67-14 run happened in a game that had already broken open. The Game 1 comeback against Cleveland happened with everything on the line, against a team playing well, in a moment where the mathematics of the situation said it was finished. The Knicks had stopped caring what the mathematics said. Games 2 through 4 followed the same pattern. New York by 16, New York by 13, New York by 37. Cleveland swept. Donovan Mitchell, who had been so reliable in fourth quarters all season, was held in check across the series in ways nobody predicted. For the first time in 27 years, the New York Knicks were going to the NBA Finals. Their point differential through 3 rounds, plus 271. Average margin of victory, 23.7 points. 11 consecutive playoff victories, the second longest streak in over 2 decades. All but one game decided by double digits. They were not just winning, they were making every opponent look like they did not belong in the same building. The Finals. San Antonio Spurs. Victor Wembanyama, 3 seasons in and already the most physically unique player the sport had ever seen. 7'4", moved like a guard, blocked shots from angles that did not exist for other defenders. The league had spent 2 years building the narrative around Wembanyama's first championship. San Antonio was the favorite heading into the series, and that was not an unreasonable position to hold. New York stole Game 1 in San Antonio on the strength of a Brunson performance that reminded everyone watching how he operates in close games. 28 points, 6 assists, every big shot coming when the Spurs thought they had stopped him. Then Game 2, Brunson dropped 31. The San Antonio crowd went quiet in a way it had not been prepared to go. Game 3 back in New York was where the Garden came alive in a way the building hadn't felt in decades. Tickets that had already been expensive became something else entirely. The Knicks won behind a KAT 30-point performance and an OG defensive showing that held Wembanyama under his average for 3 quarters. And then, Game 4 put the entire run in context, down by 29 points in the third quarter, in San Antonio, against Wembanyama. With the series very much alive and the Spurs crowd fully believing. The situation was not one where comebacks usually happen. Not by 29 points. Not at that stage. Not against that player. The Knicks came back, not all the way, not to a comfortable lead, but close enough that with 1.2 seconds on the clock and the game tied, Brunson drove baseline and launched a shot toward the rim, with the outcome of the entire series hanging on it. OG Anunoby tipped it in. The arena went completely silent. Towns deflected the inbound pass. Knicks win by 1, 3-1. 1 away from everything. Game 5, closeout, San Antonio. The Spurs needed to win this game to extend the series, and every fan in that building knew it. The energy in the first quarter felt like a genuine last stand. San Antonio playing with the desperation of a team that understood exactly what was at stake. Jalen Brunson scored 45 points. 15 of them came in the fourth quarter, in the minutes when the margin was real and the pressure was as large as any moment in basketball. He attacked every closeout. He found the pull-up when the drive was cut off. He hit free throws with the game on the line, as if the crowd and the noise and the 53 years of waiting behind him were completely irrelevant details. He became just the 4th player in NBA history to score 45 points in a finals closeout game, alongside Michael Jordan, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Bob Pettit. When the final buzzer sounded, Brunson stood at center court for a long second before he moved. Just stood there, looking at the floor, like he needed that moment to absorb what it was before he could look up and face what it meant. And then he found his father. Rick Brunson, assistant coach, former NBA player, the man who put a basketball in his son's hands long before anyone outside their family understood what was being built, was standing 10 feet away on that court. They came together in the confetti, arms around each other, and Brunson said something close to his father's ear that the cameras could not catch. Nobody outside that moment knows exactly what it was, but the floor they were standing on and the trophy that was coming told you everything you needed to know about the conversation. Walt Frazier, who played on the last Knicks championship team in 1973, called Jalen Brunson one of the greatest Knicks of all time. No qualifier, no hesitation. And now remember what was said before any of this started. If your best player is 6'1", you are not winning a championship. Maybe the 10th best point guard in basketball, if you were being generous. A 6'1" kid the league said was too small. A player they ranked 10th at his own position. A contract they called an overpay before he played a single game on it. A team that had lost twice in the first round in 2 years and had no structural reason to be different this time. That team went on a 67-14 run the NBA had never seen before. That team put up 83 points by halftime of a playoff game. That team won 53 years of waiting in 5 finals games with a plus 271-point differential through 3 rounds and an average margin of victory that made every opponent look like they had been outmatched from the first possession. They were doubted at every stage, and they answered every stage. How Brunson built himself into a player capable of carrying a moment that size. That story started long before Game 6 in Atlanta, and it is even more impossible than this one.